Hello, everyone. My name is Joy Morin. I am a piano teacher and a blogger at colorinmypiano.com.
Amy Chaplin. I'm a piano teacher and a blogger at pianopentry.com.
We just got back from a trip. We traveled from our respective homes in Ohio and Indiana to a training for piano teachers in Boston. And we thought that we would make this video just as a way for, first of all, for the two of us to kind of debrief together after this experience, but also just to kind of share with our blog followers a little bit about what we learned, in case you're interested in this approach. So this, just as kind of an introduction, the certification course that we attended is something offered through the Gordon Institute for Music Learning, which we will probably refer to as GIML. So that's what that means. This was a 2-week course. It was hosted by a music school called Brookline Music School in the Boston area. So we were gone for 2 weeks. We were in class every day. It was like being back in school again. We studied hard. We learned about music learning theory, which we will probably refer to as MLT in this video, which is it's an explanation for the way that we learn when we learn music. So much of our course was centered around this book by Dr. Edwin Gordon. So this is what the book looks like that we learned from and studied from.
Really big book. Show them how big it is, Joy.
It's a thick book, and it's not easy reading by any means at all. It's definitely a book that you have to be well focused and read slowly and think carefully. Amy and I very often, as we read each evening together, we would stop and just kind of interact with each other, and we were underlining things. We were really trying to understand as we went.
I literally don't have a page in this book that I've read that doesn't have something underlined in it. And it was made so much easier. Like, it was very intense, but you know, being able to learn together and just talk and debrief every single night made, I think, the learning 100% easier to be able to do it together. So
definitely. Yeah, that was really helpful. And then the next day to have the class discussion and we could ask questions and things like that. That was really helpful. So over the 2 weeks, we ended up only getting up to, I mean, basically halfway through the book, if that. So Amy and I are both kind of hoping to hold each other accountable to keep working our way through more of the book together. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But anyway, maybe I should back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about who Edwin Gordon is, or was. Edwin Gordon was a musician. He was a bassist and a professor and a researcher and a theoretician, basically. He passed away just in 2015, I believe. But basically his life's work was all about studying the way that we learn when we learn music. So I think what set apart this course that we attended is the fact that it focused on how we learn as opposed to only looking at how we teach. But of course, if we can understand how we learn in the first place, that has a lot of implications to how we teach. So Edwin Gordon's work kind of centered around understanding music aptitude, which is your potential to learn music, as opposed to your achievement. Your music achievement is what you actually do accomplish. You know, how much of that potential do you realize? So he's done a lot of work in that area. He found that in his research and in his attempts to understand the way that we learn when we learn music, he started with his college students. Then he found that he wanted to go younger. So he went to high school students and he went to middle school students. And eventually he found himself working with babies and infants and toddlers and newborns, because he just really wanted to understand from the very beginning, how does this process work? How do we understand music? How do we learn it? So there's a little bit of a summary.
I think his work has greatly impacted, you know, the way schools, you know, teach and instrumental, you know, bands and stuff. And it's actually something that I wish that I had when I was a choir teacher, and just understanding that sequence of learning, just so important. So, you know, is the first one to kind of bring Dr. Gordon's work into the piano world. And so, yeah, continue.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. because I think for us piano teachers, we're going, who is this Edwin Gordon guy? What is music learning theory? And it's just so new to us still, but it really has already made an impact on classroom in music instruction, like Amy was just saying. So, if...
Yeah, they have a series called, I think it's called Jump Right In. If you've ever heard of that, it's a great curriculum. We got to see some of the materials. And so if you're a school teacher, that's something you might check out.
Some of the certification courses offered by GIML, most of them actually are specific to classroom instruction. So there's early childhood music, there's elementary instruction, and the piano certification I think is not offered as often.
Right.
But it's something to watch for if you're interested in this approach.
And we got
is there anything else?
Childhood. I was going to say we got a lot of early childhood, even in our class, and we were able to be lucky enough to observe several of the Brookline classes, early childhood classes that were even using some of Maryland's early materials. So that was really excellent experience to see how it affects, even toddlers, 3-4-year-olds.
Yeah, it was great to not just be talking about the theory, but we also got a lot of hands-on, and watch teaching demonstrations and so on.
We're talking about Dr. Gordon, so I think this is a perfect time for Joy to share her first experience getting to actually meet him, and I'm so jealous that got to happen.
Okay, yeah. So Edwin Gordon came to visit Hope College when I was an undergraduate music major there, and I had never heard of Edwin Gordon before then, but it was, I think, the music education professor, Christina Hornbach, who brought Edwin Gordon in. So he was on campus for 2 or 3 days. He visited some of our music classes. Our professors had us do some readings, some excerpts from some of his books. He's written many, many books to prepare us before he came to campus. So we got a little bit familiar with his ideas. We learned what audiation was. We learned what music learning theory was. We learned what music aptitude meant. We all took the music aptitude test for the advanced level 1. Yeah, and it was just so great then to hear him speak and to hear his life's work and just the way he understood music. So much of it just made so much sense. It was just very intuitive, and was obviously just such a great thinker. And I don't know, hearing him speak, and he did a Saturday workshop as well for music teachers in the area. Just ever since then has really impacted me, even though, it was only a few days of exposure to the approach. Just that still was something I carried with me, as a young piano teacher. So I think even just understanding what audiation is, which we're gonna get into more in just a little bit here, but just understanding what that was even just helped me really understand what happens in our minds when we think about music and when we learn music, and how do I develop that same thing in my students. So that was a little bit of my experience. Amy now is going to tell us a little bit about how she first encountered Gordon.
Excuse me. Well, in my graduate studies back at Ball State University, I had learned about Dr. Gordon and Marilyn Lowe and her method, and was really intrigued by it. A lot of it just being because knowing what my difficulties were, even professionally, as far as improvisation, and and I'd been taught mostly, I was an excellent sight reader and could play and read, but I couldn't audiate, and it took me years to be able to play for my church worship band and be able to improvise on those chords. And so this was all very interesting to me, lacking, and wanting to give that to my students. I actually looked into using some of Marilyn's methods when I first opened my studio, and did a little bit of dabbling around with some of her early materials. I had read the Eric Bluestein book as well in my grad studies, which Joy, I think, has. She can maybe show us a photo of that. This is one of our recommended resources to start with. It's just a little bit easier to read than starting with Dr. Gordon's Learning Sequences in Music book. He is in Pennsylvania, I believe, elementary teacher. And so a lot of it does talk about that, but it's completely applicable to any music teacher, whether you're a school teacher or a piano teacher. So anyway, so that was kind of the first book that I remember reading based on this theory. And I just want to talk a little bit about Marilyn too. She's from Missouri, and it was just such an honor to have her teaching. I got to say, she just has the most beautiful smile. I loved seeing her smile in class, and just her joy for music learning theory. And she first met Dr. Gordon and learned about music learning theory. She did a complete 360. She was just, I'm done with the way that I'm teaching. And she just jumped right in and wrote her own method. And I just think that's just so incredibly commendable, like that. And she, I think, has been teaching music moves for piano since 1992. But I find it also incredible. Her background is inspired by many Dorothy Taubman, Mannheim Pressler, Nadia Boulanger. I think I'm saying the names wrong. But she just has a really, great history of mentors behind her. The fact that she had Dr. Gordon even, alongside her as she was trying to develop her method. Yeah, anything else on Marilyn, Joy?
I think I love the way that Marilyn told this story about, when she first encountered Gordon and realized this is really what she wanted to do. And she started going to some seminars and things with Gordon, but then realizing that there was nothing piano specific yet. So when she talked to Dr. Gordon about that, he told her, well, you're just going to have to write it. So again, I think it's just so commendable that she was willing to dive in and learn this and try to understand the theory. And she's really been a pioneer, I think, in trying to bring this to piano. One of the points that Marilyn made during the course to us was, she talked about that ideally someday there will be many, many piano method options that are all based on music learning theory. And I think, wouldn't that be great? I'm so excited to think about.
She wants it to happen.
Yeah, she really does.
Yeah.
It's exciting to think about
the theory.
Yeah, that piano could be just as impacted as the early childhood has been and the schoolroom general music instruction. I think it's exciting to think about. So this is, we're going to next get into a little bit more summarizing what music learning theory is. And it's definitely, I think, for me at least, it's daunting, like trying to understand all of the theory and then to figure out how to apply it and get started with it. But just, I think it's important to understand that this is all new for all of us, and over time, this is going to be a theory that is just sort of disseminated further, synthesized further, and it will become something that's more normal in teacher training and so on. I really think that's the future of this. Anyway.
I think it can seem like a lot up front, but you just have to remember, one step at a time. Even Dr. Gordon said it's important, Marilyn, what she did was amazing. She was able to just do a complete 360, but Dr. Gordon said, don't feel overwhelmed that you have to, to do that. It's okay to take one step at a time. Even one of the teachers in our class said that the first thing she did was just make a change with how she presented rhythm. It was as simple as that. So the fact that you even recognize that something should be changed in the way that you teach is, you can even take, so.
Definitely. Yeah. I admire those people who can do a complete change in their studio, but I'll admit that I think for me, it's going to be a more gradual process.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into a little bit about what audiation is. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Amy?
Well, audiation is, well, that's okay. I can do a little bit. You can kind of chime in a little bit as well.
Great.
Audiation is basically hearing music, right? And being able to understand it. So it's basically what audiation in music is what thought is to language, right? So we think about is what we first learn. Well, actually, for the very first thing we learn as babies is we're acculturated in people talking to us around us, right? And so in music, we need to be kind of absorbed early childhood days with just lots of different tonalities and meters and styles of music. So we need to be hearing it first. And then what happens? We start speaking it in language, right? We start saying mama and dada. And so we start repeating what we're hearing. And then we then start learning letters, right? So in patterns and words and putting those words together. And then we start reading those words and then translating it and making inferences for ourselves and understanding how, sentences go together. So there's just a lot of correlation between how music is learned and how language is learned.
Yeah, I think it's a really helpful analogy, and it's one that Gordon uses a lot in his book. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's definitely gets us a long ways.
Right.
So
right.
I think for me, learning, just having this word audiation, which is a term that was coined by Gordon, by the way, was so helpful to me because it helped me understand what happens in my own mind when I do music.
Right.
So I like to think of it a little bit.
It's not just.
Sorry. Go ahead, Amy.
I was going to say, it's not just hearing it. It's then being able to, translate it and happening and understanding it.
Right. I like to think of it like, we all know what happens when we get a song stuck in our head, or we can imagine, a familiar tune. And it's kind of a funny phenomenon to think about, that we can hear music in our head, but that sound is not actually physically present. But yet in our minds, we can sort of, we think that we're hearing sounds, kind of. It's an interesting thing. So audiation refers to that, but with kind of the caveat that, again, you're understanding what you're hearing. That's really what
you're giving meaning to the music, just like thinking is giving meaning to language when you actually have your own thoughts.
So, for example, if I'm hearing the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in my head, it's not just that I kind of hear the tune, but I don't understand it. As a musician, because of my experience and my background, I can hear, I know that opening interval is a fifth, and I could go to the piano and I could play it. I could probably play it on a recorder. I could sing it, and I understand what the intervals are. I understand that it's in a major key. I understand that it's in a duple meter, that sort of thing. Because of my background and experience, I establish a context to it, and I also understand then the content of the tune itself and what makes it Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Right. Yeah.
And the benefit of that, if you can audiate well, if your music education has kept that audiation skill up, along with your playing ability and so on, it's kind of an underlying thing that manifests itself by being able to do skills like improvisation, and being able to take a familiar tune and play different harmonies with it. So it's
the way I like to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, you can finish.
We have a little bit of
delay.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I love again, going back to the analogy of vocabulary, right? We're giving ourselves patterns that we can then put together to actually make something. So improvisation is often thought of as just doing, you just sit down and you just do whatever, which, there's more to it. And that's something that I've been, trying to do a lot more with my students. And of course, the Forrest Kinney pattern books have been really super beneficial, but I still struggle. And I think even my students sometimes, more than just thinking about, questions and answers, and actually having a basis to start with, and not just having it be a complete, giving them a vocabulary of rhythm patterns that they use. Okay, let's improvise using this specific pattern. Using, all the black keys, or using all of the white keys plus E flat and A flat or something. It's giving a vocabulary that we can actually use.
Definitely. I think sometimes as teachers, we think about that, well, I want my students to be able to improvise. I want them to be able to compose. I want them to be able to play by ear. I want them to be able to sight read and perform. And those skills are part of it. But I think for me, understanding that audiation is underneath all of that yet. So the actual goal is audiation, and then audiation manifests itself in these different skills that we develop in our students. So for me, that was just huge. And like Amy was talking about, it's all about developing a vocabulary, just like with language. In order for us to communicate and for us to have meaning for things, to understand and communicate, you have to have a vocabulary. And that's developed first through acculturation. And then gradually you're developing context and content and understanding. And that's all part of developing vocabulary.
Yeah. I even remember that moment when that happened for me more, when I was forced to start to improvise more and learn more about chord structure and not just sight reading music. And then, several years later, I was starting to just hear things in my head, and I could hear, licks.
Yes.
Improvisation licks in my head, and that's what that is. So.
It's so helpful to have a language for this and kind of a method for starting it.
just talk really quickly about, you know, we talked a lot in the class about modes, right? Tonalities. You know, in Western music, we focus a lot on major and minor. Well, really, those are modes. So technically, there are 8 modes, right? You have Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, right? I got all those. So we spend a lot of time just acculturating ourselves. Like every day was a focus on the mode and learning the characteristic tones of that mode, the primary chords of that mode, so that you learn to then, you know, audiate and hear what you're supposed to be deciphering in the music. So we did a lot with that, learning Dr. Gordon's rhythm. I'm trying to think of the word, his rhythm.
Syllables?
Syllables, thank you. His rhythm syllables, which I was always familiar with. I've done a lot with Takadimi, that's a whole nother thing to talk about. But his syllables really, really make sense. Go into details, I guess, but
we'll save that for a blog post or something.
We'll save that for a post, yeah. But yeah, it was good to kind of learn something new and see how it really worked with how we audiate and feeling flow in music. So
definitely, yeah, it's part of that process for audiation, you know, is first the acculturation. So when we're doing rhythm and tonal work with students, we use neutral syllables at first as part of that, and then using the syllables, the rhythm syllables, as well as solfege syllables. That is part of kind of establishing context again. So how does this rhythm fit inside of a meter, or how do these pitches fit inside of a tonality and a keyality? So then that's what the syllable work is for. And then gradually the goal is to get rid of the syllables and just you're still audiating and you're understanding the music even without the syllables.
Yeah, so lots of exciting things.
There's so much that we could get into. I think, I don't know if there's anything else, Amy, that you wanted to kind of cover at this point at least, but we wanted to kind of end by talking a little bit about how Amy and I, you know, are going to start trying to incorporate some of this stuff. Do you want to start, Amy?
Yeah, there were several, activities that we did in our classes that I'm really excited to use with my students. Of course, one of the first steps that I'm going to use is just trying to incorporate those rhythm syllables into all of my students, really, even some of the older ones, and talking to them a little bit, some of the older ones, about these as opposed to always counting 1E and a 2E and a. So just trying to make that switch slowly. I might do a little bit of like pattern work, tonal pattern work with some of my students at the very beginning of their lesson, just echoing this pattern. Fej. And I do group classes about every 6 weeks, so I'm really looking forward to really using more of this during those class students, middle school, high school girls. That I'm looking forward to doing like some harmonic work with, just standing in a circle and and building and singing a melody over the top, and just the possibilities that are abound with that are just open wide. So I'm really excited to experiment with that. It's a little bit scary because it's a little bit new, but I love to sing and want to use piano playing and singing, and they love to play and sing, and so this is to me the perfect way to help develop their ear. So little things I'm looking at.
For me, it's, I think, pretty similar. I would like to, with a beginner sometime this fall, dive into Marilyn's books. This is the Keyboard Games book A, and then there's a book B. This is for beginners ages 4 to 6, and then it goes into books 1 through 5. This is what book 1 looks like. So I'm still kind of thinking about if I have any students that I want to transfer into this. I don't know about that yet, but I would like to try to start a beginner or two in this and start experimenting. But with everybody, like Amy was just describing, I'd like to start doing some rhythm work for sure. And then as I get more comfortable with it, do some of the tonal pattern work as well. I will say that this method book is just the way it's laid out and everything, it's different than your typical method book that you can just kind of pick up and teach from the page. So if there's teachers out there kind of interested in checking this out, definitely buy the teacher's guides, because the teacher's guides are fabulous. There's lesson plans and a lot of good information.
Here's the teacher's guide for book A and B. And I, like Joy, I do have a few new students that are starting, some siblings, and I'm looking forward to actually using some of these beginner books with them to kind of experiment with the actual method itself. So
there's a lot.
Yeah, and the teacher's book actually includes all the pieces that are in the Keyboard Games A and B book. So if you kind of wanted to just, get a taste of what it's like, definitely buy the teacher's edition.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot more we could talk about in regards to the method, but we can direct you also to Marilyn's website, which is musicmovesforpiano.com. And there's a lot of information there about the books and how they all correlate with each other and so on. So to wrap up, maybe we just want to mention a few other books and resources that you might want to check out. We already mentioned the main book that we use during the course, which again is really daunting. So this might not be the best place to start if you want to get familiar with this approach. So there is a study guide book that goes along with this, and it's a little bit shorter, and it's more kind of summarizing in bullet point format. So even that might be a better place to start than the actual book if you just want to get started. But even better than that might be this pamphlet. This pamphlet is called Quick and Easy Introductions by Edwin Gordon. And on the GIA Publications website, it's listed for only a penny. So you just basically pay shipping to get this pamphlet. So this might be a more concise resource to start with if you want to read something that's actually written by Edwin Gordon himself. The book that Amy mentioned earlier, I'll just say the title again, The Ways Children Learn Music by Eric Bluestein. So this is a school music teacher who teaches using the music learning theory approach. And this is definitely an easier read. It's definitely a book that makes you think for sure about the way that we teach. Highly recommended. And then the final book, this is not specific to music learning theory, but this is a book that I think aligns pretty well towards this kind of approach, in the sense that it asks the question, how do we learn? And really helps us think about that before we start making decisions about how we teach. So this is called Intelligent Music Teaching by Robert Duke. And this is probably my favorite book about piano teaching. So I highly recommend this one as well.
When I thought, why in the world was I not given this book when I was an undergraduate music education major? I am not kidding that every teacher should be reading this book. I mean, you have to read it. What kind of teacher you are, music teacher, or even not music teacher. I think there's application to all teachers. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. So those are some really great resources that you might be interested in checking out. I think both Amy and I are planning to continue blogging and thinking about everything related to music learning theory that we've experienced over the past 2 weeks. So definitely watch both of our blogs for more information. And if you have questions about anything, we'd be happy to try to answer those. But we thought doing this as a video together would be a fun way to just kind of, again, debrief from everything we learned and summarize. And sometimes just talking back and forth makes it easier than writing some of this stuff. So this has been fun. Amy, do you have anything else to add?
We spent 2 weeks together every morning studying, every night, the weekends, and 16 hours in the car both ways, each way. And we still have lots to talk about when it comes to music learning theory. So you just got to dive in.
Great. All right. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We're going to sign off for now, and we'll see you online. So be sure to visit Amy's website, pianopantry.com, and my website is colorinmypiano.com. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.